Hi everyone, I'm here today and I'm being joined by one of my favourite people that I have met over the last 18 months. I am joined by the activist and the leading lighter. Is it Wise Up Action that you're a member of, Emmy? It's Emmy Butlin. Am I pronouncing your name right, Emmy?
Yeah, Emmy Butlin.
Now, Emmy, I met Emmy outside the Ecuadorian embassy last year, and I've met her many times since. She is a tireless activist for and an advocate for Julian Assange and the Fourth Estate, and I'm so pleased that she's accepted my invitation to have an interview because Emmy, you filed a Freedom of Information Act request recently. Now I'm going to get to that story in a second, just to highlight people, just to catch people up on what's happened, because there's been so many different court proceedings with regards to Julian Assange this year. He was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy on the 11th of April in an act of what I consider fascism. He was dragged out of the court of his asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy after they had received a $4.2 billion loan from the IMF, wasn't it? Just a month after.
That's right.
And he was then sent straight to court for the judge for his hearing, his hearing as to what was going to happen, because the charge at that stage was still him just skipping bail, wasn't it, Emmy?
At the same time, he was arrested with regards to the US request for extradition as well. So the two arrest warrants were live at the time of his arrest.
So the arrest warrant was for him skipping bail. Once they'd got their hands on him, that's when they unsealed this indictment over in America. That was the charge of him. It was originally single charge of him conspiring to hack a password, wasn't it?
That's right.
Okay, so this all happened at the same time on the 11th of April, and the judge at the moment, judge at that time, Judge Snow, he said that Julian Assange was a narcissist who cannot get beyond his own self-interest, a selfish interest. That doesn't sound like somebody who is being fair and unbiased to me. Does it to you, Emmy?
He was definitely biased. It's really extraordinary because the hearing only lasted for about 15 minutes, during which time Julian Assange didn't say a single word other than to confirm who he was. Obviously, the judge, Judge Snow, had a predisposition and a pretty good idea about what he wanted to say, for charging him with skipping bail. Obviously, where did he hear about all that? And he formed his opinion
Of course.
from the BBC, perhaps.
What informed his opinion? I mean, he's meant to remain unbiased and Switzerland and neutral, isn't he, the judge? Now, that was the pre-hearing, and then we were given a date. Was it the 2nd of April we were originally given? You say that he was given a date of, was it Southwark Magistrates Court he was going to appear in?
On the 11th of April, at the end of proceedings, where we were all wondering what's going to happen next, we read in the papers that Judge Michael Snow had referred his sentencing, Julian Assange's sentencing for the bail skipping, to a different judge at Southwark Crown Court. And the date would have been 26th of May when this sentencing was going to take place. Suddenly, on the 31st of April, we heard that the following day, the 1st of May, the hearing was taking place in Southwark Crown Court.
It was brought forward 3 weeks, and a day's notice was given of the court hearing.
Exactly, and we've been watching it like a hawk because obviously, with our solidarity work, we want to follow this case at the courts. And so we had to very, very quickly, on the 31st of April, notify all the people that wished to participate in our solidarity action to come and participate in the proceedings in Southwark Crown Court. We filled the public gallery, 23 seats at Southwark Crown Court, and we had a very strong presence outside, solidarity activists chanting and holding banners and posters. There was an array of media, the world's media that were filming outside the court.
Now, he was on the 1st of May, wasn't it? He was sentenced, and he was sentenced. The maximum he could have got sentenced, the maximum sentence was 1 year for skipping bail. And that maximum sentence, I'm correct in thinking, is for people who have a history of maybe skipping bail, or somebody who has done this sort of thing before. And he got almost the full sentence for, and from what I can tell, there were no extenuous circumstances or anything like that that were taken into consideration by the sentencing at the time. It was just bang, he was given the maximum sentence they could, even though he's presented a case and his lawyers presented a case that said, you know, they've been after him over in America here. You know, he's obviously done this. He skipped to avoid what they're doing in America. This has proven what he's saying, have been saying all along, he's right. And they still gave him the maximum sentence, didn't they?
Well, I'm not a legal expert to remember.
Neither am I, but that sounds dodgy, doesn't it? That sounds really bad.
Listening to people who know, like, for example, Geoffrey Robertson QC, the interviews that he gave in the past regarding exactly this issue and exactly the level of sentencing that we were talking about potentially at that stage, he made references to a few weeks or sometimes a fine.
Yeah, that would be. I would have thought that a fine or a few weeks or electronic tag or anything like that would have been better than him being locked up for 50 weeks in, let's face it, United Kingdom's Gitmo. And we hear from John Pilger that he can't even fraternise with other prisoners. He's in the hospital ward and he can't even fraternise and speak to people. He's been blocked to speak to people, let alone obviously gather information for his defence. Now, I'm correct, you went to court that day, weren't you, when you were sentenced, correct? You were inside the court. Now, talk us through what happened there in the court, because something has been missed out, it seems, from the official report that has come out from the court with regards to that day, hasn't it? Tell me more about that, Emmy.
Suffolk Crown Court was very well organised. Some of us arrived early, and the people who arrived first compiled a list of activists, so we were able to communicate to the court, and we managed to get in. 23 of us got in the court, and the rest of us remained outside chanting and holding banners. We waited. We had 3 clerks approach us to explain. We were not to take any notes, and throughout the court hearing, people who even reached out to grab something from their bag that were immediately approached by a clerk to say, check what they were doing, make sure not to have any piece of paper write things down. I'm surprised to this day, I do not know why this is the case, but this is how it was. We were 23 of us seated behind Julian Assange, and then on our left, we had a row of journalists sitting up on benches typing away of what was going on. And we saw Julian arrive. He didn't see us to begin with, but we attracted his attention. He turned around and he nodded. And then he sat with the back to us, facing the judge in an enclosure, a glass enclosure. He already looked very thin, to my mind. I mean, he looked skin and bones.
Just as a side point of that, Emmy, I've actually watched an interview with John Pilger this morning, and he said he saw him 10 days ago, I think it was, and he's lost even more weight since.
Well, this was already the 1st of May, so he was only in custody for a few weeks, and his clothes were hanging off him. He had a haircut, obviously prison haircut. He bared it. He bared it well, but we were very concerned at how he looked, his physical appearance. And then while we were listening to the mitigating circumstances that his legal counsel put forward, we had a collective sigh in the public gallery and around the court, because of course what they were putting forward was Julian Assange's very serious concerns about Sweden's rendition history, where they have renditioned people to the CIA, people who consequently went to tortured in other countries. And the European Court of Human Rights had fined Sweden more than €1 million to compensate these poor people. And we heard how these people were treated by the CIA while they were being renditioned. And we were literally sighing. Julian Assange had a very good reason to seek asylum when he did, to avoid visiting Sweden.
Of course, this is something that I pick up on, and I point to all the time, because the liberal talking heads in the media over here and certain supposed left-leaning politicians will say how Julian Assange has to go to Sweden to face consequences for his rape or the rape accusations. Now, first of all, he's never been charged, and we're going to get to that in a minute, aren't we? We've never been charged, but they say that he's got to go over there for rape. Now, the thing is, Julian Assange has always said that this charge of rape, and his supporters have always said this charge of rape, it's a non-charge. It's a charge just a way of trying to get their hands on him, and because there was a sealed indictment. And of course, when they finally do get their hands on him, lo and behold, a sealed indictment emerges. Therefore, the whole point of him being wanted for questioning over a rape allegation in Sweden, which is nonsense because it's consensual sex without a condom. That's essentially what don't want to get into that though. But the whole point of that, the whole point of them bringing that story up and using that, wasn't to make Julian Assange stand trial for anything that he supposedly did in Sweden, because it would never actually get to trial. The whole point was to try and get their hands on him to extradite him to the United States, which is exactly what happened, proving that Julian Assange is right 100% all over again. Now, when you were in court, something happened while you were in court that day that really piqued your interest, didn't it? Tell us about that, Emmy.
Well, Julian Assange stood very, very respectfully towards the court throughout, but the judge gave him reason to have something to say. And what the judge said, I cannot quote because I haven't seen all the writing, but we were there and we witnessed this. She basically claimed in her reading her pre-written statement that he had been charged in Sweden, and she held him responsible.
Charged in Sweden?
Yes.
Charged in Sweden. Is this something that the media have been guilty of saying over and 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 over again, Emmy, by any chance, that he faces charges in Sweden?
Yes.
I wonder why she was under the impression that he faced charges in Sweden. And sorry, carry on, please do.
So he interrupted her. He interrupted her twice because the first time he wasn't heard. So he repeated himself. And he put the record straight, saying, I have not been indicted, I have not been charged in Sweden. And that is all.
So he interrupts her twice to say, I have not been charged in Sweden. And she reads out her statement. In the end, she does address what he says at the end of that statement, though, doesn't she?
That's right. So she does not respond to him at all. But at the end, when she finishes her sentencing remarks, she says something along the lines, yes, you're right, you have not been charged in Sweden. Okay.
Now, when the court transcript came out...
It only came out a few weeks ago. Now, I read it.
Now, it didn't have any of that on the transcript, did it? From what I can tell.
As it never happened.
As if it never happened. Now, did it have that he faces charges on the transcript at all? No. So it's totally papered over the fact that she got that wrong.
Exactly.
Totally. And she's had to correct herself at the end of it, and there's no record of that. So it's no record. It's as if it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Now, that's not right, is it, Emmy?
Well, I don't know what is the tradition or the practice in this case. but I am aware that going back in 2012, the Supreme Court, examining his original extradition to Sweden, had also made a mistake in writing, and then they had to correct it in writing. Okay. I know that very well because that correction I have used repeatedly over a number of years to put the record straight, that even the Supreme Court of England was making clear he has not been charged. Okay. So on this occasion, they just never happened.
So it's as if it never happened. Now, I'm just going to quickly, you won't be able to see this, but I'm going to quickly switch over to my other screen because there's a request from you for a Freedom of Information Act request, isn't there, at the moment? And this is a request for uncorrected sentencing remarks of R versus Julian Assange, bail act offence of HHJ Deborah Taylor, Southwark Crown Court on the 1st of May. And it says here, the Dear Ministry of Justice, I'll read this out if you want, Emmy. I attended the sentencing of Julian Assange at Southwark Crown Court on the 1st of May and listened to the sentencing remarks of Deborah Taylor. The judge read out her sentencing remarks from pre-prepared documents on her screen. At some point, she mischaracterised the sexual misconduct allegations he faced, claiming he had been charged and indicted. Julian Assange interrupted to correct her statement. She continued reading without interrupting, but when she finished reading, she acknowledged it was correct, that he had not been charged. And then it links through to the judiciary report, as you can see here. And that is the remarks that were released. You said they were released a few weeks ago, Emmy, this one. So this was released a few weeks ago, and nowhere in there did it have Judge Taylor's, I think it was Judge Taylor, wasn't it? Judge Deborah Taylor's correction on those remarks. Now, I'm no legal expert, but I'm pretty sure that if you're transcribing something, a transcript of something should have the exact words that were written. Now, when you attended court on the 1st of May, Reuters published a report saying he's sentenced to 50 weeks in bail. And you also link through in that Freedom of Information Act request, you also link through to the AP, which I've got up on the screen now, and the Times, which I've also got up the screen. Now, they did actually report on what you're talking about, didn't they? Those two agencies.
Yes.
So and from what I can tell, they're the only two really that reported on it. Other than that, nobody did. Is that correct, or none that you could find?
From what I have looked, that is correct.
This is this is almost like a lie of omission, isn't it? This is him correcting the judge's words. That's pretty huge, I would have thought.
Well, it shows to me a bias, and that's where we're going back to how the press and the role of the press, the mainstream press, is playing in prejudicing the judges over this case. And I go on to say in this Freedom of Information request that since it is very, very important to highlight that she was writing the sentencing having in her mind, being influenced by the press, that he has been charged in Sweden. And that's why she used that language. And she was therefore prejudiced against, because there's a huge difference between someone, a preliminary investigation being carried out to investigate allegations, and a very different thing that someone is charged waiting to face trial. In this country, there's a huge difference. And in the judge's mind, who is legally coming in the trials, she's done loads of trials and participated, obviously bears a very strong sort of prejudice.
Of course, there's a massive difference, isn't there, between being accused of murder and being charged of murder. There's a huge difference, same as with rape or any other crime. And the fact that the judge got that wrong surely should tell us that there's something amiss here and he's not facing a fair trial, and there's huge bias against him.
Exactly, the way she's sentencing what she perceives as a crime, skipping bail, she judges and sentences according to how serious she finds the crime to have been. And therefore, all of this plays a very important part in her making her mind up. Now, And I go forward to obviously explain why I'm doing this, because the BBC has been, in its website programs, mischaracterized the sexual conduct allegations as charges, as he's been charged, as he faces charges for a number of years. And in particular, since his arrest and the very first few weeks that they were reporting on his arrest, including the very day that he's been sentenced, again and again, he's being characterized as being charged, as facing charges and all that.
So
and this is the BBC.
The thing with the BBC is I have a real bugbear against the BBC, Emmy. And first of all, they in my opinion, steal £154 off every household in this country for the privilege then of being propagandised on a daily basis by them, which is my own opinion. But the thing with the BBC is this. They have got 35,000 employees around the world, you know. 35,000. 25, I think 22,000 of those are full-time BBC employees, and the rest are like subcontracted and hired and that. But 35,000 people around the world. They know what reporting the news is. They know how it should be done. And if they're not doing it consistently on a story, which they're not, I personally have caught them in about 5 or 6 lies with regards to Julian Assange over the last 18 months. And that's just me on my own, in my own council flat doing it. And I can figure out them lying and give instances of lying. If they are lying in this way, it's not accidental. It's not accidental. I refuse to believe that. They are doing it on purpose. And they're doing it because, let's face it, the BBC is nothing but the establishment's public relations at this moment. And that's all they're doing. And that's all our media is the same to it. Sorry, I digressed and I went on a bit of a rant. But the BBC, yeah, the fact that they have been writing such flat out lies about him. I mean, I saw one video that they did on Newsnight, and I did a video about it on my show, how they were saying that he was the genius behind the hack that led to the collateral murder video being released. Now, you and I both know, Emmy, there was no hack when that collateral murder was released. That was a leak from within the intelligence services from Chelsea Manning, or Bradley Manning at that time. It was a leak.
War crimes.
Yes, and it was what they proved. War criminals were war criminals, and that is why they want him, isn't it? That's why they want him, because he can prove that they are who we always suspected they were all along, but who they said, no, it's fake news, you can't prove anything. Well, he proves it, doesn't he, on the regular basis?